Hello everybody and welcome back to Art a la Carte. In today's video I'm going to show you two fun inking techniques that you can try out for Inktober. So these are both techniques that I've used during my Inktober and I've had a lot of requests for how did I do them or show us a little bit more about them. And the first one is the feather that I did in day number, I don't know which one, but it was part of the Choose Your Own Adventure story. I'll leave a link to that video in the description box below. You can check that out. And the other one is one I didn't make a speed painting of. I simply posted it on my Instagram, and it's this really kind of cool picture that I used black ink with, but with the technique it causes this really cool effect, and I will talk about the tools and how I do this in this video. For supplies, you're going to want to start off with a couple of different pieces of paper. When I'm working with ink, I prefer to use paper that has a really thick quality to it. So cardstock or a multimedia paper, Bristol paper, all of that would be a good choice to try out. You'll find that the ink will respond differently to different types of paper. So if you don't like the way the ink responds to the paper, maybe just try a different brand or type of paper and see if that helps change how your ink reacts to the paper. The first technique we're going to do is really easy, but so much fun to watch, and it is this feather. I'm going to be using ink in a bottle, but you can also try different ink pens as long as they're water soluble. You might be able to get the same effect, but for the best effect, you're going to want to use a liquid ink. Now, brand specific, this is Winsor Newton's Indian ink, and once it dries, it's permanent, so I can go over top of it with water. After it dries, it's not going to move, but while it is wet, it is highly movable and flowable, and that's the technical term, so I enjoy using this ink here. Next, you're going to want something to create a line on your paper. You can either use a dip pen or a brush, whichever one you use. For my piece, I use this dip pen right here, but for fun, I'll go ahead and try to do the same technique using a paintbrush, since I know a lot of you may not have access to a dip pen, and we'll see how well it works. Now for this technique, I find the best type of paper to use is a watercolor paper because it has a sizing which helps the paper not to quickly absorb the water, allows you to move it around. You're going to want that, otherwise the effect is going to be not as awesome. For this, I'm going to create just a simple line across the paper, and then I'm going to begin going back and laying in more ink on places that I want the feather to spread. So I want a little bit of the end of the feather to not have as much fluff, so I'm going to not put ink down all the way to that end, but I'm just layering in a whole bunch of ink right onto that line. And you're going to see it's just going to sit on top of that paper. It's really shiny. It's not going anywhere. Close this up. Now before this has a chance to set or sink in, I'm going to take my mister and simply add a couple of sprays to this part. I'm going to try not to spray too much down here. Just mist right up here, and we'll see if it happens with the magic. There we go. So I'm going to take here and just going to dab off some of the excess water on the side with a tissue. But I'm not going to worry about it too much because I like that texture, especially right up along here. I'm not going to mess with that. But that's how you get it, the cool feather effect. And again, depending on whether you put a lot of ink or a little ink, it'll work differently. So it does take a little bit of trial and error to figure out just the right amount for what you're trying to create. Also, paper is important. I tried this technique on a piece of paper that I thought would work, and this is what happened. This does not have the sizing, so the ink just soaked right in and didn't do a lot of anything. For our next piece, there are a couple of supplies we're going to need, and one is a special brand of marker, which is called an Elegant Writer. I got this in my last Smart Art box and didn't really think much about it until I read a couple of comments from you guys saying that I should check out some videos that use these writers with water. And what I found was amazing. These markers are so much more than just calligraphy pens. So to start off, I'm going to use just a basic piece of cardstock paper and sketch out a fun design that I want to create. So let's go this way, and I'm going to create maybe a little cherry blossom. So I'm going to start off by kind of sketching in the branch. And these are calligraphy pens, so they have this chisel edge on them to create calligraphy lines. And it's not important to fill everything in. Again, I think the more you practice with this, the funner it will become. But I'm going to create just the branches here. And these are also a water-soluble marker, so that's what we're going to use to kind of activate this reaction that happens with these pens. Now, before I get into that, I'm just going to put in just a little bit of the blossoms. And there we go. Now, the fun thing about this is there is no rush. You could let this dry even a couple of hours and still go back and activate it. Some artists, though I haven't personally tried it, have said that they've worked on it and come back days later and it still activates beautifully. The thing you need to remember is it can only be activated once. Once the water has touched any of the ink and it's done its thing, after it dries, it stays where it's supposed to stay. Now, if there's a part of the picture that even when you missed it didn't really get enough water to activate it, later on, and you put some water on, it will activate that. So that's something to keep in mind. So to activate this up, there's a couple of different methods. One, you could use just a spritzer and spray along here. And the other one is to take a nice fluffy brush, add some just clean water to it, and kind of drag it along there. That's my favorite one. That's my favorite kind of technique to use. So let's go ahead and do that. And you're going to find this paper is going to curl up a little bit just because there's going to be a lot of water on here. But here we go. We're just going to begin moving this around and using a lot of water. And at first you're just going to see just this bluish tone coming out. All right, and then I'm going to take a tissue and I'm just going to dab away some of that paint or the water. And now you're going to see, I don't know if you can see it right now, but how the pinks and purples are beginning to show through. And it's absolutely beautiful how this just transforms. Now again, depending on what type of paper you use is going to determine the outcome or the reaction that the marker has with the paper. So as you can see here, I got totally different techniques by using this type of paper, which was a thinner kind of craft paper, as I got with this paper and even with this paper. Also remember to give it a little bit of time to fully dry before you finally see the full picture. But once it dries, you can then go on the paper again with this marker, add some new lines, either to sharpen up areas or for other places that you can splash some water on and get some different effects. Just for fun, because I haven't tried this effect on a watercolor paper, I want to see what does it do with watercolor. So I'm going to draw another little sketch out here. And I love the webbing effect that you can get. So that was just with misting instead of using the brush, kind of having it flow. With the brush, you get a little bit more control of where you want the water and how you want the water to, and what ink you want the water to touch. So just kind of depends. I love this because there's so many fun things that you can do to experiment and play around with just a couple of different ink supplies. And if you're like me, it's getting towards the halfway point of Inktober. It maybe is a little bit challenging and maybe it's not as much fun anymore creating with ink. So finding something new to do with it to challenge our creativity is really fun. So check out playing with these elegant writers. This is not a sponsored video, but I will leave a link to where you can purchase these and where I got my Winsor Newton ink. And this is the ink that I have been using for most all of my Inktober pictures. So those will be in the description box below. If you have been having fun with Inktober, I would love to see your pictures. So hopefully you're posting them to Instagram using the hashtag Inktober. But also if you want me specifically to see them, make sure to tag me in your photos so I can take a peek. Several of you guys have been doing that, and it's really fun to see what everyone's creating, and it kind of gets me excited and gives me lots of fun ideas as well. I also want to give a big thanks to everyone who commented on my Smart Art Box video and told me about the cool thing that these pins do. This definitely was not what they were created to do, but what an awesome side effect from just playing around with your art supplies that you think only does one thing can do so much more. So go out, create, make art, have fun, and until next time, God bless you guys, and we'll see you in another art video. Bye-bye!